World War II ended for the 58 survivors aboard German submarine U-505 on June 4, 1944, about 150 miles from Rio de Oro, Western Sahara. The first enemy vessel seized at sea by the United States Navy since the War of 1812, the assault on the sub by Captain Daniel V. Gallery's Task Group 22.3, the capture of the crew. They were subsequently transferred to Camp Ruston in northern Louisiana. And the work by a boarding party from escort carrier USS Guadalcanal, ensuring it did not sink, have been so ably described by my colleague Callie Martin that they need no further elaboration here. Since 1954, the Type 9C U-boat has been an exhibit, now indoors and some 35,000 square feet, at Chicago's wonderful Museum of Science and Industry on the south side of the city. In June 1996, I visited the museum and toured U-505. That was unforgettable. Never have I felt so claustrophobic in my life. That tour and watching filmmaker Wolfgang Petersen's 1981 motion picture Das Boot, The Boat, about a World War II German submarine in the Atlantic, disabused me of any stereotypes about undersea life. Over the years, I have wondered about U-505 and its path to the fateful confrontation with Captain Gallery's force. Here, I just want to document the initial part of that path up to and including the U-boat's second mission and entry into the Battle of the Atlantic. Americans often lose sight of the fact that on December 8, 1941, Adolf Hitler ordered Grand Admiral Erich Raeder's Kriegsmarine Navy to target United States ships, as well as the vessels of Central and South American countries who expressed support for the U.S. after Imperial Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. This was 3 days before Nazi Germany's actual declaration of war on December 11th. Since the Third Reich had a very limited surface fleet, and as the sinking of the battleship Bismarck by the Royal Navy the previous May demonstrated, and ran tremendous risks undertaking long-range voyages, the task of taking the war to American shipping fell to the submarine force. A new phase in the Battle of the Atlantic was about to begin. Warfare by U-boat was the purview of Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of Germany's U-boat arm, who had served as a submarine captain during World War I. Prior to U.S. entry into the conflict, he already faced the none-too-easy mission of strangling Britain's ability to wage war through submarine blockade. In fact, Donitz had expanded the offensive perimeter against the United Kingdom in April 1941 by sending his vessels deep into the central Atlantic. Now, 8 months later, he faced the awesome challenge of devastating American shipping as well. Initially, Donitz's submarine fleet scored triumph after triumph. The year 1942 would prove to be a time of tremendous peril for the Allied war effort when the German Navy appeared to be the arm of Hitler's armed forces, which might swing the balance in favor of the Axis powers. Donitz could draw on recently completed subs like U-505. Commissioned in late August 1941, it was built by workers employed by the Hamburg-based Deutsche Werft, a firm which in peacetime constructed merchant ships. Weighing over 1,100 tons, about 250 feet long, 22 feet in width, and able to dive several hundred feet, it was one of the technological terrors of the first half of the 20th century. 2 saltwater-cooled diesel engines, each with 2,170 horsepower, propelled the craft. As a Type 9C U-505 had a range of almost 17,000 miles, meaning it could show up in the most unexpected places for merchant vessels. Patrols could actually last 100 days or more. While it could make 18 knots on the surface, the best that could be achieved below the surface was 8 knots. Submerged, it was extremely vulnerable to faster pursuers. When it settled on a target, the submarine could bring to bear its 6 21-inch torpedo tubes, 4 in the bow, 2 in the stern. On board were 22 of these ship killers. U-505 also had a 4.1-inch deck gun and two anti-aircraft guns, a 20mm and a 37mm. Conditions for the crew hardly generate envy among students of World War II. While the Type 9C was larger than earlier types and could transport some 60 men, lack of space always dogged crew members. Only one sailor could stand in the tiny kitchen at a time. Bunk rotating could not be avoided because the Kriegsmarine provided a mere 35 bunks. Materials created by the Museum of Science and Industry detail just how onerous things became over time on lengthy patrols. All provisions, eggs, cheese, rice, noodles, dried potatoes, canned and preserved meats, coffee, and beer eventually tasted like the diesel fuel that fed the engines. To call life aboard unsanitary would be a massive understatement, as the smells associated with inadequate body hygiene commingled with diesel fumes. Moreover, it was a seemingly endless time to go without seeing daylight or breathing fresh air. Once completed, U-505 was not rushed into combat. From late August 1941 until well into January 1942, intensive training with the 4th U-boat flotilla claimed the time of the crew. Absolute mastery of all instruments aboard, division of responsibilities, diving, the techniques of assault on surface ships, drills for torpedo failure, how to avoid detection, and what to do if attacked and damaged comprised central goals, life or death goals, of the instruction. Then, shortly after the start of the new year, in mid-January, U-505, under the command of Axel Lowe, set out on its first mission, circumnavigating the British Isles and arriving in France. This it did. The sub's new home was now Lorient in Brittany. There was little time to waste, however. Mission 2 awaited. On February 11, 1942, Lowe and U-505 embarked on their second mission. Its destination was the waters off the coast of West Africa. This U-boat had finally joined the Battle of the Atlantic. This patrol of 86 days was quite successful. U-505 sank 4 ships, 1 American, 1 British, 1 Norwegian, and 1 Dutch. The U.S. craft, the cargo ship West Ermo, was struck by one of the U-boat's 21-inch torpedoes on April 3, 1942, about 300 miles southwest of Sekondi Takoradi, in Ghana. These victims of U-505 were among the more than 1,100 Allied ships brought down by Donit's submarine arm in 1942. If it was a happy time for Donit's men and their Führer, 1942 was a year of incredible danger for U.S. and British leaders. Through gigantic technological and organizational innovations, though, the Allies turned the proverbial tide in the Battle of the Atlantic in 1943. And those innovations would make Atlantic patrols an especially fraught venture for the crew of U-505 well before the capture of the sub in June 1944. World War II marked a turning point in naval warfare, and one of the most significant battles fought during the war was the Battle of the Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic was a struggle for control of the sea lanes that were vital for the Allied powers to maintain the flow of supplies, troops, and equipment. At the heart of this battle was the German U-boat force, led by Admiral Karl Donitz, whose submarines would haunt the waters of the Atlantic, striking fear into the hearts of merchant sailors and military personnel alike. Among the U-boats that became legendary for their role in this battle was U-505, a German submarine that would become the first enemy vessel to be captured at sea by the United States Navy since the War of 1812. The story of U-505's journey through the Battle of the Atlantic, culminating in its capture by American forces in 1944, is one of intrigue, danger, and technological innovation. This is the story of that journey, how U-505 entered the fray, wreaked havoc on Allied shipping, and eventually became a symbol of victory for the Allied forces. U-505 was a Type 9C submarine, one of the larger and more advanced U-boats of its time. Commissioned in August 1941, it was part of a new generation of submarines built by the German Kriegsmarine, designed to be faster, more powerful, and capable of longer-range patrols than previous models. The Type 9C was over 250 feet long, with a beam of 22 feet, and displaced over 1,100 tons when submerged. Its powerful diesel engines allowed it to cruise at a speed of 18 knots on the surface, but its submerged speed was limited to 8 knots. Despite this vulnerability, U-505's long range, nearly 17,000 miles, made it an ideal weapon for the Atlantic campaign, as it could strike unexpectedly and wreak havoc on enemy shipping far from home. U-505 was not rushed into combat immediately after its commissioning. Instead, its crew spent months in intensive training, honing their skills and mastering the intricacies of submarine warfare. They trained under the auspices of the 4th U-Boat Flotilla, focusing on everything from diving and surfacing techniques to perfecting the art of torpedo attacks. These training exercises were designed to ensure that the crew could handle the complex machinery aboard the submarine and survive in the harsh conditions of undersea combat. The training also included drills for emergencies, including how to deal with torpedo failures or attacks from enemy warships and aircraft. Once the crew had mastered the submarine's operations, U-505 set sail on its first mission in mid-January 1942. Under the command of Captain Lieutenant Axel Lowe, the submarine circumnavigated the British Isles before arriving at its new base in Lorient, France, where it would be stationed for future missions. But this was just the beginning. U-505's second mission would take it deep into the waters of the Atlantic, where it would join the Battle of the Atlantic and engage in its first taste of combat. The Battle of the Atlantic had begun in earnest soon after the United States entered the war in December 1941, following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. In response to this, Adolf Hitler ordered the Kriegsmarine to target U.S. and Allied shipping, even before Germany officially declared war on the United States. This marked the beginning of the so-called Second Happy Time for German U-boat forces, a period during which the U-boats enjoyed a series of early successes. Admiral Donitz, who had served as a submarine captain during World War I, was the architect of the U-boat strategy. His goal was to sever the vital supply lines between the United States and Europe, choking off the flow of goods, troops, and equipment to the British and their allies. U-boats, with their ability to strike quickly and disappear into the depths of the ocean, were the perfect weapon for this task. The success of the German U-boat fleet in 1942 was nothing short of staggering. The Allies lost hundreds of merchant ships and naval vessels, and the war in the Atlantic seemed to be tilting in Germany's favor. In particular, U-boats like U-505 proved to be a serious threat to Allied shipping, thanks to their long range, powerful torpedoes, and effective tactics. U-505's second mission, which began on February 11, 1942, took it to the waters off West Africa. This mission would last 86 days and would prove to be a pivotal moment in the submarine's career. During this time, U-505 embarked on a series of successful attacks on Allied merchant vessels, sinking 4 ships. One of the most notable of these was the U.S. cargo ship West Ermo, which was struck by one of U-505's torpedoes on April 3, 1942, about 300 miles southwest of Sekondi Takoradi, in Ghana. The West Ermo was one of the many casualties of the U-boat offensive in 1942, as German submarines sank over 1,100 Allied ships that year alone. For the Germans, 1942 was a year of triumph, but for the Allies, it was a time of immense peril. The loss of merchant ships and military supplies threatened to cripple the Allied war effort, and the Battle of the Atlantic was far from over. While the U-boat offensive was going well for the Germans in 1942, the tide of war was about to change. In 1943, the Allies began to counter the U-boat threat with a series of innovations that would tip the balance of power in the Atlantic. The first of these innovations was the development of more advanced anti-submarine warfare tactics and technologies, such as the use of long-range bombers, depth charges, and sonar. One of the most significant technological breakthroughs was the development of the convoy system, which involved grouping Allied merchant ships together for protection against U-boat attacks. The idea behind the convoy system was to reduce the risk of individual ships being picked off by submarines. While U-boats were still a formidable threat, the convoy system allowed the Allies to protect their shipping routes more effectively. In addition to this, the Allies developed new radar systems that allowed them to detect U-boats at greater distances, giving them a better chance to target and destroy submarines before they could strike. The introduction of more advanced anti-submarine ships and aircraft also made it harder for U-boats to operate in the Atlantic without being hunted down. By 1943, the situation had become increasingly dire for the German U-boat fleet. The Allies' countermeasures were beginning to have a significant impact, and the losses suffered by the U-boats were mounting. While Donit's forces had once been able to dominate the Atlantic, the tide was now turning against them. As the Battle of the Atlantic raged on, the fortunes of U-505 began to change. The U-boat, which had once been part of Germany's successful offensive against Allied shipping, found itself in increasingly dangerous waters. The technological advancements of the Allies, combined with the growing effectiveness of anti-submarine warfare, meant that U-505's missions were becoming more fraught with peril. In June 1944, U-505 embarked on what would be its final mission. The submarine was assigned to a patrol off the coast of West Africa, but it never completed that mission. On June 4, 1944, U-505 was attacked and captured by a task force led by Captain Daniel V. Gallery of the United States Navy. The attack took place about 150 miles off the coast of Rio de Oro in the Western Sahara. The capture of U-505 was a significant event in the history of World War II. It marked the first time since the War of 1812 that the United States Navy had captured an enemy vessel at sea. The success of the operation was due in part to the efforts of the crew of the USS Guadalcanal, an escort carrier, which had been tasked with hunting down and neutralizing German U-boats in the region. A boarding party from the Guadalcanal was able to board U-505, prevent it from sinking, and take the crew prisoner. After the capture, the surviving crew members of U-505 were transferred to Camp Ruston in Louisiana, where they were held as prisoners of war. U-505 itself was brought to the United States, where it was studied and eventually became part of the exhibit at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, where it remains today. The capture of U-505 was a momentous event, and it marked the end of the U-boat's career as a threat to Allied shipping. The submarine had played a significant role in the early years of the Battle of the Atlantic, but by the time it was captured, the Allies had turned the tide and were beginning to secure their dominance in the Atlantic. Today, U-505 serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of underwater warfare and the technological innovations that helped turn the tide in favor of the Allies. The submarine's legacy lives on, not only as a symbol of victory in the Battle of the Atlantic, but also as a testament to the courage and determination of the men who